As a new post as the U.S. representative from Florida's brand new District 6. He joined me this week to talk about the impact that he hopes to make in Washington and the challenge he'll face trying to work with people he doesn't agree with.
Well, I think it was interesting just for me in my class as opposed to maybe some other classes in the sense that we got up to Washington. I got up on New Year's Day, and you get sworn in on the 3rd. But I didn't really know what it was going to look like on the 3rd because they were still debating all this stuff with the fiscal cliff and some of these issues up until almost very last minute of that Congress. And so in that respect, I'm watching, trying to see, am I going to have to deal with this or not? And so it was a little bit interesting in that respect. And then once you go and it's your turn to get sworn in, there is a lot of pomp and circumstance and things like that. And I'm not really a big fan of that. I mean, I understand there's a little bit of part of that. As a military guy, we have our ceremonies, but I'm not sitting around puffing my chest so happy to be up there because it's about me, because it's not. It's really about trying to get the country on a better footing. And we got a lot of work ahead of us.
So would you have preferred to have been involved in all that final minute fiscal cliff dealing? Or, hey, there's still enough coming down the pike that you're going to be involved in some of those talks about debt ceiling and everything else anyway?
Well, I think that there's enough for me to do. I just think what I took from that is it seems like we create our own crises. We create these deadlines rather than just conduct the business of the House and the Senate in regular order and generate policy. That's typically how we've done it throughout our history. And then it seems in the last 3 or 4 years, we've kind of gone off that. I mean, for example, the Senate, they haven't passed a budget in over 1,300 days. I mean, it's just basically purely off continuing resolutions. And I don't think that's the way to do business. And so I'm looking forward. We obviously got these hurdles coming up. Let's pass budgets. Senate needs to pass a budget. And I think I've embraced proposals like no budget, no pay, which says if we don't pass a budget on time like we're required to by law, then we shouldn't get paid. I mean, why are you as a taxpayer paying us if we're just not even going to do our job? And so I think that the process of Congress needs to be reformed.
That week before the fiscal cliff deal, I talked with Congresswoman Corrine Brown, and I asked, hey, is it a matter of Democrats, Republicans just not wanting to work together? That was her perspective, but at the same time, she said, never had a problem working with the Republican in the area, Andrew Crenshaw. Are you the kind of congressman who's going to be saying, yeah, Democrat, whatever party, we'll work together? Or is there some party division in your mind because the ideals of your parties are so different?
Yeah, I think on certain issues there is a big divide in ideals. I mean, for example, in the Wall Street Journal this morning, there was an article with John Boehner, and he basically said that the president told him, look, we don't have a spending problem in this country. Now, I just fundamentally disagree with that. I mean, so he's obviously coming at it from a very different perspective than we are. So some of those may be difficult to bridge, but I do think that there are areas where you can work with people regardless of party. I mean, I mentioned things like no budget, no pay. That's bipartisan. There are Democrats who think Congress needs to be reformed. There are Republicans who think Congress needs to be reformed. That may be something where you see a lot of younger people like me who aren't necessarily old bulls wanting to reform the system on both sides of the aisle. And so I think it depends on the issue, but in terms of the proper role of government and the level of spending, I think there are a lot of people on the Democratic side who just believe that we don't have a spending problem, that it's basically because we're not taxing enough. And then there are people like me who say, well, wait a minute, historically we've never really been able to generate any more than about 19% of GDP in tax revenue. We're spending 23% of the GDP in spending, so there's no way we're going to be able to tax our way out of it. And so it's tough. I mean, and there is a divide about the proper role and function of the federal government.
So even within the party, is there a need for changing leadership? And I ask this because the other freshman congressman, Ted Yoho, from our area, some people said stepped in it because he didn't vote for Speaker of the House John Boehner to return. Is there a need for a change in leadership even among Republicans in Congress?
Well, for me, when I looked at the election for Speaker, I tell people I follow the William F. Buckley rule. I vote for the most conservative, viable candidate of the available choices. And what I saw was Nancy Pelosi and John Boehner were our choices. And so some of the people who didn't vote for Speaker Boehner, they just voted for people who really weren't running. And so I looked at it and said, he was nominated by the conference. There hasn't been anybody else who has been put forward to say that they wanted to take the leadership reins. And so I think you you need someone to step up before, you know, I'm gonna go a different direction. And you know, I have a personally good relationship with John Boehner. He has a tough job, you know, but we need to make sure that we do better than what we did with the fiscal cliff deal. There was a lot of I just think we feel like we didn't do as good as we could have done. Now, having said that, he's got a very difficult dance partner with Obama and Harry Reid. I mean, they are not someone who's really been willing to work with him, and I think he was willing to make concessions early on, and they basically just take the concessions and say, okay, what else do you have for me? So it's tough to do that. I think he's recognized that that hasn't been productive, and that we're going to conduct the business of the House through regular order. We're going to generate our policies. We're going to send it to the Senate. They need to do their job, and then the president can make a decision going forward.
So Republicans have two new Florida voices.